the Drupal TV account, retweeting that the session is starting, and let's jump into it. All right, so I'm pretty excited about this talk because it's something I've always wondered about. So what goes into contributing, especially the non-technical side of contributing? So today we hope to discuss Drupal.tv's origin, non-technical obstacles we faced, as well as the project build portion, which Jack will be going over, the process of acquiring the Drupal.tv domain itself, the launch, and looking forward. I'll be moving relatively quickly through my slides because there are quite a few. I like to think that it's interesting information. So hello, my name is Ashraf. I am the founder of Debug Academy. I worked as an architect at Acquia for a few years, and at the moment I primarily do training through Debug Academy, as well as work as an architect and consultant on various Drupal and React related projects. So if you're looking for, a consultant to help out on your projects, to help make sure the architecture is right, or a team to train your team and make sure you build their project correctly, I'd be happy to help out. Reach out through Debug Academy.
My name's Jack Garratt. I'm a developer and instructor at Debug Academy. However, I've not always been a web developer. In a past life, not too long ago, I was a historian. I got actually my doctorate from the George Washington University, studying German history and colonialism. And I got that in 2016, but made a career change and started learning HTML and CSS, and then eventually went through the Debug Academy Drupal course and learned Drupal. And ever since, I've been trying to, level up my skills. I've got a few of those Acquia certifications, and I've built a number of sites, but I'm very excited to just kind of share my experiences and just enjoying the Drupal community, as it's still a fairly new community to me.
A quick pitch here. We'll have another one on the last slide. But basically, if you'd like help with training or development, feel free to get in touch with Debug Academy. Our team is fully remote, so naturally we teach online, but we are based out of the Washington, D.C. area, if any of you are also local. And again, we specialize in both Drupal and React. All right, so how did this project start? Where did the idea come from of what we wanted to build? It actually started from a tweet. So Rachel from the Drupal Association actually tweeted and said basically, creating a Drupal TV site, is something that could mostly be done in core, and it could be a fun project. There was some interest, and at the time, coincidentally, I was looking for a project for our 3-month course because we always favor real projects when running our 3-month course. If you're not familiar, the idea of Drupal TV comes from WordPress.tv, or I think WordPress.tv, and that is a very similar site that WordPress had before Drupal TV existed. So that would be the inspiration, and so I tried to jump on this opportunity and essentially announced, hey, we'll be building it, no one needs to worry about it, we've got it. So from there, I thought it might be as simple as, let's just build the site, right? But there were a handful of non-technical issues we ran into. So the first issue, biggest issue, is where do we find videos for the site? I could Google the word Drupal and maybe I could search for it on YouTube, but you find videos of varying quality. You find a lot of videos from training companies and so on, but it's hard to know where you get them from. So to create a list of Drupal videos, you need a list of Drupal videos. Fortunately, in the Debug Academy Slack, I talked to Kirsten, who is one of the co-founders of Drupal for Gov. If you're familiar with Drupal GovCon, she's one of the people who started it, and traditionally runs it. So she's great at networking. Not like me, I'm not great with names and keeping track of who I've said hello to. But Kirsten basically said, "Hey, do you know Kevin? He records the videos for Drupal GovCon, and he also helps out with a lot of other conferences." So she essentially pointed me in Kevin's direction. And Kevin is a big deal when it comes to the Drupal recording initiative. Hello, Kevin. Glad you're here. So I reached out to Kevin, and you'll see a common theme. A lot of the conversations here took place on Twitter. I'm not a big tweeter, but I kind of had to get out of my comfort zone and reach out to people and be more proactive in that department. So Kevin was very generous, and he reached out and said, "Thanks for reaching out. How can I help?" He's a great asset to have on this project, in general, of course, but especially on this project, because he had recorded hundreds and hundreds of Drupal conference videos. And to date, I am very confident that number is well over 1,000. So we talked back and forth. I gave updates on the project. But what I would say is, one note is, in this presentation, things are only semi-chronological. So what I'm going to be doing is, I've divided the material into more topical than chronological. So you'll see the beginning of our conversation here. On the next slide, you'll see towards the end, closer to launch. So close to launch, I reached out again and said, "Let me know if you have a list of all or most of the playlists from conferences." I thought he was going to go dig some up or link me to accounts, but he sent me a Google spreadsheet which already existed, and he had all of the playlist URLs ready to go. On top of that, if you look at the follow-up messages, he even had edge cases. This camp didn't use playlists. GovCon has separate playlists for each day, and so on. So that was great, because I want to show you the dates here. December 28th is when I asked for the videos. And as you'll see later, the site launched on January 1st. So the fact that he had them all ready to go is really what enabled us to have that very fast turnaround. Of course, the site was built before the 28th, but the content wasn't even in my hands until then. So that solved the video problem. What about the design problem? So there was a question of who should design Drupal.tv. I had experience with hiring designers, and I was comfortable doing that for Drupal TV. Naturally, this was a student project, but because our student projects are always real projects, we always have a budget for hiring a designer for our class. So I planned on just using that relatively modest budget to hire a designer. But at a Drupal camp event, I ran into a really talented really talented designer whose work I admire, and they were really eager to contribute. And they basically said, "Don't hire a designer. Please let me contribute this for free. I want to be part of the project." So I was happy with that. But as I learned, when someone volunteers to contribute for free, if they have other work, the other work has to come first. It just makes sense. So that person got busy. We had a bit of a back and forth where I kept saying, "Hey, we can't move the deadline because this is tied to our semester, right? We need this done by 2 weeks from now when we have the class on theming." And that ended up being a recurring problem, because you can't really demand that somebody has a few day turnaround when they're doing it for free. At the end of the day, we didn't really end up with a completed design. And you'll see that reflected when you visit Drupal TV. It's still, to this day, the design isn't perfect. It's not great. But nonetheless, they did all of the work for free, and I appreciate all of their contributions. But it's one lesson learned. If you have a deadline that's truly immovable and you have no flexibility in it, it's not fair to expect someone to contribute as part of that deliverable. So one lesson learned. Another unexpected obstacle. And this one, these few slides, I worry about the wording of them because it might sound like sour grapes. There will be a conclusion slide at the end of it, and it really isn't the case. But I do want you to know, I'm trying to, lift the curtain and let you know what was going on in our minds, what we were seeing, and so on. So the first unexpected obstacle was that other people kept essentially launching, or not launching, but we kept hearing about other people working on alternative Drupal TV projects. So the first one you see here, October 29th, we got a message. If the slides are not updating, hover over the window, and I believe there's a button that says live, and press that live button. It should refresh it. I think it's a problem with the Hopin platform, but that has worked for me. So I was receiving some messages on Twitter again, actually from Avi, who I believe was in the chat. So he was messaging me saying, just a heads up, someone else, took a crack at building the site. And I got a follow-up message. So, we talked about it a bit. It made sense until there's some sort of central management of the project. People were going to work on it. It's not like I had a claim or a right to the idea. And I appreciate it, Avi, because he really did. I wouldn't have even known that these projects existed, but not only did he tell me about them, he also worked to essentially talk them down and say, no, this other company really is working on it, they're doing it. So you see, I got another message from him a few weeks later, and basically saying there's another person working on the project. And let me pause there. So part of that, we just had to reach out to everyone and try to tell them or let them know we were also working on it. And then we saw the Drupal recording initiative announced on Drupal, on the Drupal.org. And this was a guest blog by Kevin. And I was pretty excited reading this until I reached one line, which was, we need a Drupal equivalent to WordPress.tv. And at this point I was thinking, great, this is what we're building. But the wording of it was, there are several in the works, but that has been the state of things for years. And in the moment when we were working, on it with our team and everything, I was like, no, you too, Kevin, you also don't think that we're going to launch it. So again, wasn't a big deal, but these are all the little things that we were seeing and considering. No worries, Kevin, nothing to feel bad about. But I saw the message, I was about to share it with our team, with the students, and I was like, wait, this line makes it sound like it might not happen. Let's wait until it actually happens. And once we actually launched, I announced it, and as part of the response to the announcement, there was a very polite, very reasonable request, which basically said, while I applaud the work done, I'm not convinced we're in a position where the site can be essentially worked on by one company. So again, after a few all-nighters and then finally announcing it, receiving a response that kind of was like, hold the enthusiasm, we need to change something. That again, I was like, oh gosh, this is another thread I can't necessarily send to the students. It's not fully in the best light. So I think, especially in hindsight, looking at all these messages, they're all very, very reasonable. But I did want to sort of lift the curtain on, behind the scenes, people working on it, reactions, that sort of thing. So my focus at the time was like, no, I want all the messaging to be positive because these students are working hard and, they don't really have any feedback and they haven't really interacted with the community yet. Luckily, all of these issues had the same solution. And some of the solutions just came down to stepping out of my comfort zone where I'm usually an introvert pretending to be an extrovert. I needed to pretend to be an extrovert more often by over communicating. So I tried to message Kevin more frequent updates, and that was very beneficial, I think, for both of us because he had valuable feedback in return, but it also helped him realize it actually is happening and generate that enthusiasm. And by the time the project launched, I think he was at least as enthusiastic about it as I was, and he put in a lot of time entering the videos and everything. With Rachel, I got on a call with Rachel. I felt like when I was writing Twitter messages, I was like, I'm going to write something and word it poorly. So I was like, can we just get on a call? And Rachel got on a call with me, and we hashed it out and basically came to a shared understanding. And that was a very positive conversation. So over communicate, and Avi really was a big part of allowing me to get in touch with everyone else working on the project. Even created an email thread between me and others working on the project where I basically said, hey, can we either combine projects or you essentially hold off on your project? I'm okay with either one. In all of those cases, the people basically didn't respond and just dropped their projects, which was interesting. But communicating pretty much solved everything. Another thing is don't take it personally, because when I talked to everybody involved more, all of my concerns essentially were wiped out right away. When I got on the call with Rachel, when I talked with Kevin on Twitter, the enthusiasm was essentially returned pretty quickly. And it wasn't really much of it. There really was no argument or debate. It was really just, oh, now that we can talk, we can realize, we are on the same page. So when reading comments on the internet, try not to, read it in the negative light, which is probably what I was doing in some cases. And finally, keep building, because with open source, you might have heard it's a do-ocracy. If you want something done and you do it, then it'll become part of the project. But in this case, the fact that we continued to build and show progress to different people really was all the convincing they needed. So at the end of the day, we continued to reach out to everyone and tell them what was going on. And again, they not only were excited about it, but they spread the word about it. Again, networking isn't my forte, but Rachel helped get the word out through the Drupal Association. Kevin helped get the word out through all of the various Drupal camps, and so on. So when you're working on these projects, you always want to just make sure that you keep the lines of communication open and let everyone know where you're at. Don't build in silence. It's not a matter of if you build it, it will come. All right, and Jack, take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ashraf. While I don't have all of the little interesting community tidbits of the various conversations, I wanted to talk a little bit about building Drupal TV itself and talk about how to create, how we created this website with Drupal developers, or essentially budding Drupal developers, whether they were career changers or developers, but maybe a WordPress background or something like that. All right. Perfect. So the first thing, and this was, I had essentially gone through this program, and I was, a competent themer front-end developer, but I had never really thought about putting together a whole site and working with, a grandmaster, if you will, or as a person who's kind of architected sites before. So Ashraf and I kind of sat down over coffee and kind of wrote down what we wanted to do and the goals. And for me, and I think any developer who's kind of getting into Drupal, having this experience was so helpful. Thinking about, okay, we want to have this kind of a website, how do we get there? Prior to this project, I knew how to make content types or media types or views, but I didn't really think about the consequences of certain design decisions. And so this was kind of the next level to my education as a Drupal developer. And so this project, I think, is really kind of built with the mind of engaging and trying to get people interested in Drupal development with, as Ashraf mentioned, you could build this site with mostly existing Drupal functionality. So the first issue we encountered is what features do we want? We knew we wanted videos, and we knew we wanted playlists to kind of categorize those videos, whether it by conference or by topic. Then we thought about, do we want conferences, like a conference map, podcasts, and a more thorough article implementation? And thought about what would go into that, how many extra steps or tasks we would do. And we ultimately decided on just doing videos and playlists. So some of the limitations, and I'll try to get to some of the questions maybe towards the end, is some of the limitations and concerns is we are having a bunch of our students coming through, and we had a deadline, as Ashraf said. We had this 3-month course, but to teach all of the skills, realistically, we had 1.5 months to achieve this project, which in my mind seemed, that's a fairly strict deadline. And then the last part, which I think kind of offsets this, of course, is our students are kind of eager to implement their skills, what they've learned, right? So in some ways, especially our students who are career changers, they want to get these skills into their developer muscle memory. And so that kind of acted as a little boost to our little wind in our sails. And as I said before, most of what we could achieve was Drupal out of the box or a few contributed modules I'll talk about in a later slide. So if you just kind of wanted an overview of who participated in this project, it was a semester of about 10 to 15 students. And of course, Ashraf kind of led the project, and I acted as the technical project manager. And so I was essentially involved with the everyday, taking some of those grand ideas, those features, chunking them into manageable tasks, and giving them to our students. Which, it sounds maybe, initially I thought that might be easy, but it's actually very hard. And the students who we were collaborating with, so a snapshot of some of these kinds of people who are working on this project, career switchers, I count myself among them, a WordPress developer, a backend Java developer, and an IT engineer. So we're really like a whole array of people with different backgrounds, panoply, if you will, which I always think is really great. You always bring your different kind of, your different thoughts and knowledge, if you will, to a project, and it kind of manifests itself in unique ways. So building the site. I just want to talk about 3 little sections and maybe not necessarily get into the nitty-gritty building aspects, but talk a little bit about our approaches to building the site and how we interacted with our students and budding developers to get the best product or the best outcomes, if you will. So the first part is talking about media and videos. The second is the layout builder. And then the third is one of the advanced pieces of functionality, parsing YouTube playlists with the batch API. So, all right. So the first part is really creating our media type. And we had a few things. Yeah, that's a really good question. Just quickly, career switchers mean people who aren't developers by trade. So I was a historian for like 10 years, and I decided to change careers. Some people in our classes have, work bankers or librarians and such, and then they wanted to get into web development. So I'll get into a little bit more about what roles they played in a second, but essentially they built the site. So one of the things...
Sorry, one comment that's always been important to us is during the semester we have a hands-off policy. So not only did they build most of the site, we weren't allowed to write any code. The only thing we could do is meet with them or create tasks for them. So when the semester finished, I had like a day or two where I was allowed to work on it. But throughout the semester, me and Jack were not allowed to touch the code.
Yeah, exactly. We were there to guide and to structure everything, but the students were building the site with our input, but they were the ones doing it. And I think this will be reflected in what I talk about here is we had our goals, right? We want to create certain media types, the certain parts of the site, but we wanted to give them a suite of options to implement, but not constrict them to say, you must do it this way. We wanted them to explore Drupal and come back with what they think as the most optimal choice for achieving, the goal of the task that they're doing. So the one example in the first bullet point is, what field did we want to use to capture the remote video link? There's an out-of-the-box remote video media field that comes with core, or there's a contributed module called the remote video embed field. It's a little bit of a word salad, but we tasked them to test them out and to come back. And at the time, we went with the remote video embed field because we thought it was the most responsive. This was at the time. And then the second point, which I think is maybe even more important, is when we were having discussions in class with our, with our students, is thinking about what metadata we wanted to collect for each of these videos, right? A description of the video, the recording date, and we asked them initially, like, all right, let's come up, if we have these videos, what do we want to collect and why, and how you might build it in Drupal. So I engage in a conversation about fields and adding them to our media entity, which once again, you're empowering your developers to come up with some of the designs, and they might come up with something really interesting. Students always have a way of surprising you. As a longtime teacher, that always never fails. They always come up with something you might not have thought of, which I think is great. The second bit is we implemented a component-based design, which, long story short, is we wanted our developers to create little components that we could place throughout the site. In this context, it was creating a lot of different block types that site builders could use to place on pages to create our site in general. And what we wanted to get into their muscle memory was a kind of workflow. And this was basically create some kind of component in Drupal, then if need be, use a twig template to customize the HTML, and then theme it writing Sass. And then we place it wherever. And that was the workflow for most of these for building the project, which I think is great. So it's component, twig template, theme. And I think that's a good recipe for becoming a competent front-end developer, a good themer, if you will. Obviously, some tasks differed from that, but getting into that workflow, that repetition is important. And then finally, we had one where one of the advanced backend tasks, which was parsing the YouTube playlists. And I'm not quite sure if we'll have time to talk through the code, unfortunately, but we'll see. We created a custom module that imports YouTube playlists, say, of a camp, and then this code parses each video in the playlist, and each video becomes a piece of media content where you map the YouTube fields, the information, onto the Drupal fields of your media type. And we worked with, or I should say Ashraf worked with our Java backend developer on this functionality. So that's really the heart and soul, the engine that that pushes Drupal TV. So the last few takeaways, I just want to, no, you can go to the next slide. What I thought was most important for me was, right, you build the site, you give your developers the sandbox. Limited is actually slightly redundant here because the sandbox is limited of tasks, and they're going to bring back some solutions, and they're going to argue or say why this was actually really good. Like I said, they might surprise you, which I always enjoyed. And this second bullet point is something I'm appreciating more and more as I'm becoming a stronger Drupal developer or learning more, is that they're thinking, quote, inside the box, right? What can you do with Drupal? They don't want to overcomplicate a solution. Sometimes when I'm doing something now, Ashraf or someone else will be like, oh, you can do it actually in this way. You don't have to go through and do all this custom code. And then I just hit myself over the head. Which I think is important. The second part is communicating to our students, our developers, about kind of giving them confidence, but we created our tasks as a way that they really shouldn't be blocking each other. So if one person was working on a component like a block type and another person was working on a block type, we could tell them that they weren't blocking each other. Go and do your best. Because a lot of times, so many students, and I'm curious if other developers and other companies have this issue, maybe, maybe not, but so many people say, I don't want to do this because I fear I might mess it up and block other people. And so it was really important for me, and I think for folks at the Bug Academy to tell students, work with students to be like, you do your task, I've seen your work, you can do it, you're not blocking anyone. And usually after communicating all of this, they actually start working on the task and get it done fairly quickly. So once again, over communicating, as Ashraf said, is really important. So we'll go to the last slide here for me. And the last thing is, once again, reiterating the theming workflow with this course. And I think as for any budding Drupal developers, repetition is so important of getting into and strengthening and getting those skills into your repertoire. So once again, it was block types, twig template, and style, and then really use the layout builder. So that was just essentially a very broad overview of what went into creating the website, but also interacting with our students and how the thought processes came into this. So hopefully that was enlightening. I know a lot of our students have got a lot out of this. So thank you, and I'll pass it back to Ashraf.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'll continue my speed talking. So when it came time to launch, or actually while we developed the website, we actually developed it under the name Drupal.tube, because Drupal.tv was taken and I had no idea who owned it or anything about how to get it. But again, Avi helped us out. So he actually put us in touch for a different purpose. He put us in touch with someone else who had worked on a Drupal TV site a while back and was considering, reviving the idea. So Avi actually emailed that person and myself and put us in touch and basically said, let's continue the thread here. You two can essentially see if you can work together. As part of the message that he forwarded, I noticed this part at the bottom. I think Dries owns Drupal.tv and I own DrupalTV.com. I mean, for me, it's a big deal because I don't know people. I don't do the networking side of things. I'm all in on the technical side. But this line actually is how we ended up getting the name. So he said, I think Dries owns Drupal.tv. And I continued the conversation, but there we go. So I think Dries owns Drupal TV. So that triggered this email. So December 25th, notice how late all of this happened. December 25th, I emailed Dries because I realized we were really close to having the site ready, and it was almost January 1st. And I thought, might be cool to launch on New Year's. So on December 25th, I emailed Dries, and I basically gave him a very quick summary. So one tip, when you're emailing somebody you know is very busy, either keep the email short and or put the request at the top of the email. So in this email, I give a quick thank you or happy holidays, and then a message where I put the request at the top of the message. Debug Academy cohort builds Drupal.tv at Drupal.tube. I know you're busy, so I'll put the request here. I hope we can use the domain Drupal.tv to host the project. I'd like to announce it as a New Year's gift. Okay, and there was actually a lot more information below that, but I made sure the request was at the top. And this thing loves putting it there. Okay, there we go. Dries gave me a short response. I like the idea. Would the website be not for profit or commercial purposes? I responded, you know, it's not for profit. He said, sounds good. I'd probably keep the domain name, but I'll point the DNS to your hosting. So within a day or so, Dries agreed to point the domain to our hosting. He did that. I emailed him back and said the site's live at Drupal.tv. So that's how we got it launched. I won't pause for applause right here about the launch. I'll continue because there's a few more slides. So I did want to highlight one of the students at the time, Lisa Mayo. She worked on the project. She contributed quite heavily to building Drupal.tv. I intentionally also highlighted her current employer's profile. So this is her profile on Mobomo, a Drupal development company out of the DC area, because not only do I like to highlight students for their contributions, I like to highlight employers who hire students and give them their first Drupal role. So that's an ongoing note. If you hire our students, we're going to look for opportunities to essentially brag about your company. So Mobomo gave her shot, and now she's been working there for a while as a front-end developer. Another quick list of people. So on the left side, it's essentially Debug Academy students, as well as Jack and I. And on the right side, you see a number of people who came up in the presentation who really the project wouldn't have succeeded without their help and contribution. So what's next? Looking forward, we have a designer on staff at Debug Academy now, so we plan to redesign it. So Drupal.tv will be redesigned. We plan to improve the search. And in fact, we actually have pull requests from a number of our students in preparation for this. So we hope to review those and merge those in. We hope to contribute some of our custom code to Drupal.org, including a auto taxonomy tagger and the YouTube playlist importer. The auto taxonomy tagger is created. It's going to essentially add taxonomy terms automatically to the videos. It's pretty cool. It's going to scrape the text from YouTube, tag them with React, Drupal 8, etc. So I'm looking forward to that, and we hope to also utilize it to automatically tag the speakers so that we can have opt-in speaker profile pages. So I know when I apply to speak at a conference, I have to go find all of my talks, but on Drupal TV, I'm hoping to have a dedicated page to myself and every other speaker, and I can basically send a link to my page on Drupal.tv. The auto tagging, I'm pretty excited about it. It is working and tested. We just need to merge it. Let's see, conference and meetup discoverability. This is roughly in priority order, but at some point we do want people to be able to go to Drupal.tv and see which conferences are coming up, not only videos of ones that have already happened. Adding support for podcasts, because there are a number of Drupal podcasts out there, but they're not centralized. And adding non-conference videos. So opening it up to, training companies where we can say, hey, Drupalize Me OS training, you all have pre-recorded videos. You can upload the free videos to Drupal TV. Let's see. In terms of getting involved, there is a project on Drupal.org named Drupal.tv. You have to spell out the word dot. You can go there if you want feature requests, and you can essentially just create an issue in the issue queue. We'll see it. Our students essentially look at the issue queue for opportunities to learn and contribute. Designers, our designer is on a project. If anybody wants to beat us to the punch and start the redesign efforts, you're more than welcome to. And the last slide is in terms of if you want to just support the team rather than working on the project. Web hosting sponsor, that would be helpful. So if any of you work at a web hosting company and essentially want to volunteer to host Drupal.tv and get a line of credit in the footer saying it's hosted at your hosting company, we would appreciate that. We've been hosting it ourselves to date. One comment on that, it's actually a really big compliment to Drupal's caching system, because this site is pretty vanilla. It does use Search API, but it's not even using Solr. It's using internal caching, and I kind of did this under the radar without announcing it because I didn't want anyone to DDoS it. So now I'm probably going to have to change the caching up a bit. But I did want to mention it's lasted for like 2 years with no problem at all in terms of performance, without a CDN on top of it, without Varnish on top of it, just Drupal's caching, Drupal 8's cache tag system out of the box, of course, configured properly. So other ways to support, hire the maintainers, which are alumni. If you need to hire Drupal developers, please get in touch with us. We'll put you in touch with contributors to the Drupal.tv project. So give beginners a shot and you'll end up with senior developers on your team. Stop fighting over the few senior developers and start with junior developers. Jack mentioned he came from a history background. I was fortunate to be able to hire him at the time as a beginner. Now he has the front-end developer as well as developer certifications, and he's on his way to Grandmaster status. So feel free to hire, keep your hands off Jack, but hire other alumni, and they'll, before you know it, become certified and more senior. And finally, all of this is funded through the money that comes in from Debug Academy's classes. So if you want to support us financially rather than donating, I mean, we don't have a facilitation for donating right now, but feel welcome to bring our team on for consulting, for training, send individual team members to learn React, and so on. We teach Drupal 7, 8, and 9. We teach React. We teach it from beginner to architect level. If you go to debugacademy.com, you'll see a bunch of our one-day classes listed. And just go through to our contact form if you're interested also in having myself or Jack consult for your project. We're a small company and we have a lot of flexibility in what we do. So even if you need us to join you full-time for a few months, let us know and we'll discuss it and see what works out. So thank you all for attending and hearing us out. We really enjoyed creating Drupal.tv. We're really excited that we have a designer on board now to redesign it. We have a lot of big plans, which we talked about. And again, we really appreciate everyone who contributed directly or indirectly to the build and the launch and the sharing of the Drupal.tv website. And we hope to continue to make it a great resource. And one more comment. There was a question in the chat earlier about, are there playlists specific to, being a beginner or to, Drupal for people who speak Spanish? The website has the facilities built out to support those playlists. I encourage you also, another way to contribute without using code or money is to look through the website, find videos, and create a playlist. And the way you would create a playlist for the time being is create an issue on Drupal.org. So go to Drupal.org, file an issue that says create a beginners playlist, and drop links to videos that can be in the playlist. We'll probably do it within a day. So that's another great way to contribute, again, for people who don't necessarily have the time or knowledge or finances to contribute in other ways. So thank you again. That's all from us. All right, thank you, Avi. You're really bringing everything together. I appreciate the offer from, is it Amazy or Amazy? I never know, but I appreciate the offer, and again, you handling the networking. the first one, yes. All right, so how do we wrap things up here? I don't know how it works with the remote sessions.
Well, there's a button that says leave.
Yeah, we're put the leave button. One more thing. We will be at the Debug Academy booth. So, feel free to come by. We're going to have live streaming on in 3 minutes or so. So if you'd like to continue conversations about Drupal TV or learning React or getting trained or how we can help you, any of that stuff, come by to the Debug Academy booth in the exhibit hall, and that's where we'll be. All right, thanks everyone. We're gonna hit the leave button now.